All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the story of one of the most influential and, honestly, one of the most paradoxical figures in modern Korean Christianity, Pastor Heum. So let's just jump right in with the big question that really sits at the heart of his entire life's work. Is it possible for one of the most successful megachurch pastors in history to diagnose and maybe even cure the very problems that megachurches often create? I mean, just look at this comparison. It tells you everything you need to know about what made this guy so different. At a time when powerful leaders usually cling to their positions, he retired 5 years early, a move that just sent shockwaves through the establishment. Instead of creating a family dynasty, which is so common, he picked a successor who wasn't related to him at all. And maybe my favorite one, while so many leaders project this image of perfection, he literally called himself a flawed piece of jade. He was a man defined by his own imperfections. Okay, so to really get what drove him, you've got to understand the problem he was staring down, a crisis he saw brewing right in the heart of the Korean church's massive success. So picture this. It's the 70s and 80s in South Korea, and the church is just exploding. I mean, we're talking growth of over 600,000 members in some years. It was massive. But Pastor Oak, he saw something dangerous lurking under the surface of all that success. He saw a church that was a mile wide but only an inch deep, full of people, but not necessarily full of disciples. And this quote, man, this really hits the nail on the head. This is from a public confession he made in 2007. He saw this version of Christianity taking over, where everyone loved hearing about blessings and grace, but the moment the topic turned to obedience or sin or repentance, the room got real quiet. He felt like he was part of the problem, creating a giant crowd that loved the good news but didn't actually want to live it out. So here's the bottom line for him. The church wasn't making disciples. It was making spectators. It was creating a generation of passive believers, people who had faith, sure, but their daily lives didn't look any different. They were an audience, not an army. Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, his idea was pretty radical for the time. He wasn't interested in just building a bigger audience. He wanted to build a committed army.
And the weapon he chose for this was something called discipleship training. And look, this wasn't your average Sunday school class. No way. This was an intense, systematic process designed to empower every single person in the seats, to awaken the laity, as he put it, and turn them into what he called small pastors.
And when I say intense, I mean it. This was not a weekend seminar. This was a serious, multi-year commitment. You'd start with a 5-week foundations course, sure, but then it was a full year of deep-dive discipleship training, and then another year of practical, hands-on ministry training. Only then, only after all that, could you even be considered for a leadership role.
And the results? They were just staggering. This system produced 1,700 trained lay leaders in his church alone. Think about that. These weren't just glorified volunteers. They were effectively co-pastors, each one taking real spiritual responsibility for their own small group. And this really gets to his ultimate goal, right? His vision wasn't about getting more butts and seats on a Sunday morning. It was about filling the world with what he called small Christs or little Jesuses, people whose entire lives, at work, at home, everywhere, would actually reflect their faith. But, a story like this is never that simple. His impact was huge, for sure, but his legacy? Well, it's a lot more complicated. It's filled with criticism, a ton of self-doubt, and some consequences he probably never intended. Yeah, you can really see the whole arc of his life right here. He starts this church in 1978 in like a tiny commercial space, and pretty soon he's a leading voice for reform across the entire country. But for me, the key moment is right there in 2003. Retiring early? That was unheard of. It set this new standard for humility and really capped off an incredible career. But his model definitely had its critics, and they had some pretty strong points. Some theologians were like, hey, this feels a little too academic, like you're turning faith into a textbook. Others worried that it was creating this perfect little bubble, this Christendom that was awesome inside the church walls, but totally disconnected from the real world. And a big one was that the focus was so much on personal growth that it kind of forgot about the church's job to fight for social justice out in the world. And the critiques weren't just from the outside. He was haunted by his own personal regrets. People said he'd spend over 30 hours preparing a single sermon, but that relentless focus came at a huge cost. He later admitted very openly that he had failed his own family. And get this, his family revealed they had never, not once, taken a family photo together. That one small detail, it just says everything, doesn't it?
But maybe the most powerful thing about him was how he spent his final years. He basically turned that sharp, critical eye on the very movement he helped create. In 2006, he gets up and delivers this absolutely blistering public confession, basically calling out the entire Korean church and himself for its corruption, its materialism, and its hunger for worldly power.
So in the end, what do you do with a guy like this? He's a reformer who ends up building an empire. He's a powerful leader whose most famous act is walking away from power. And he's this brilliant teacher who realizes his most important lessons were about confronting his own failures and the failures of the institution he loves so much.
And that's what we're left with, isn't it? This final, really challenging question. His life's mission was to build a system, a curriculum, to create these devoted disciples. But his own story, full of passion, regret, and contradiction, just reminds you that faith and failure and grace, they're just way more complicated than any system can ever truly capture.